Welcome to this continuing education presentation, a service of the Alabama Alarm Association. This member service is available to any low voltage contractor licensed by the Alabama Electronic Security Board of Licensure. This presentation has been registered with and is approved by the AESBL as meeting their standard for the renewal of your state privilege license in the security, life safety, access control, and video surveillance industry. This presentation was developed to help you succeed in the low voltage business. It is not a sales presentation for any product or service. To meet the attendance verification requirements for completing this course and to receive the certificate of attendance that you can submit to AESBL, you must attend the entire presentation and request the attendance certificate at lowvoltageceu@gmail.com. During this presentation, a series of verification words will be announced. Please make a note of these words so you can remember them, because they will be used when you request your attendance certificate. At the end of this presentation, I will tell you how to use this list of words and how to request your certificate. Now, let's start the presentation.
This presentation is project management for the low voltage contractor. It is being presented in a 2-hour CEU format. The course number for this for the Alabama Electronic Security Board of Licensure is course number 2022-0060, and it counts as 2 credits. The course is a PowerPoint presentation with instructor comments, and I will not read the information from the slides. My commentary will be why this information on the slide is important to you. The objective of this course is to give you an understanding of a project manager and their role in the construction industry. Today, the role of project manager is of a specialist nature with specific skills, instead of being the jack of all trades person that it was once considered. And developing these skills to be successful requires that a person understands certain terms and how they affect the outcome of a particular job or of an installation. So projects are usually undertaken to fulfill objectives by producing deliverables. Deliverable could be a finished installation of an access control or a overhead paging system or a video system. Deliverables can be tangible or intangible, but they will have value to the end user. A project can involve a single individual or multiple organizations with people working together to complete this process or a phase of a project. Some projects can be completed in a single day, while others, such as building a new office building, may take months or even years to complete. Even long-term projects will have a definite ending date with a verifiable result. Project management is accomplished through the appropriate application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities, to meet the project requirements effectively and efficiently. Successful project management results in completion of a project on time and within budget. When we look at business management, it is not the same as project management. Business management is more about producing the income for the business, to provide jobs for the employees, and the continued growth and survivability of the business itself. While not every project is complicated to the extent that all of the skills that we're going to talk about for project management will be used. The ability to anticipate risk and to adjust it in a timely manner is one of the most important skills that define a good project manager. When we look at what can be managed, the four guiding constraints that affect the final project outcome are scope, time, quality of work, and of course, the budget. The more complicated a project is, the more demands for the same resources a project manager has to deal with will require a greater level of skill and knowledge to produce the customer's desired results. As projects become more complicated or involved, the project manager may be the leader of a team of individuals working on the project. While the project manager is not expected to perform every task involved in the project, he will be expected to coordinate the activities of his team members to ensure the completed project meets the customer's expectation without overrunning the budget. To better understand the pitfalls of each one of these constraints, scope, time, quality, and budget, we will look at each one of those and how they affect the outcome. So some of the pitfalls that you might have in today's business environment would be to work with tighter budgets, shorter timelines, or the scarcity of resources, and of course, rapid changing technology. Failure to properly manage has a cost to the organization. And in some cases, it is more than a loss of revenue from a non-recoverable budget overrun. The loss of reputation within the community can affect business opportunities that can last for years. Poor quality of work can affect the security of the organization. It will attract scrutiny from code officials, which could result in more frequent inspections and further delay the completion of the project. In a bid situation, the scope of the project will be defined in the project specification issued by the architect. Sometimes the scope, as described by the bid documents, cannot be met as they are written. The bidder is responsible to ask any questions that would lead to clarification before the bid submittal date. This question for clarification is defined as an RFI, or a request for information. When a contractor is dealing directly with the facility owner or the occupant of the property, then the scope shall be formalized in the contract. It is important that all of the work is described in detail. If the project consists of phases, then each phase should be described in the order that they are expected to be completed in. When the scope changes, we refer to this as scope creep. What might seem like a simple request from a stakeholder, such as relocating an access control panel and a door lock power supply from the electrical room location as specified on the contract drawings, to a new location in a computer server room on the other side of the building 200 feet away, this move could result in a major cost in time and material. The stakeholder may express that since the actual panel and power supply has not been installed and that only the electrical conductors have been installed, the move should not really incur an additional cost. However, rerouting the electrical conductors will take time and possibly additional materials. If the plans have to be modified and submitted to the AHJ for approval, there could also be additional fees associated with that, and it will affect the schedule of other trades involved. If you're using a contractor to run the conduit and cabling for that install, then there may be additional charges from the contractor, the electrical contractor that is going to install the wiring and conduit. When we look at time management is making sure that you develop a schedule that will allow for all of the trades to perform their work on a project. So the project manager doesn't have to be the expert in all of the skills, but they do have to understand the task and the order in which they are to be performed. Some of those skills, such as installing conduit, running the system conductors, installing devices, or programming the system, could be better understood by one of his team members. And so they should consult that team member about those activities and what would normally be the allotted time for the completion of those tasks. When we look at quality, quality is achieved by strict and consistent commitment to certain standards that achieve uniformity of a project or a service or an installation in order to satisfy specific customer or user requirement. One of the driving factors to ensure quality is making sure that the workers have the proper amount of time allotted to complete the assigned task. When a schedule gets behind, many general contractors try to cut the time short allowed for the remaining task, which could result in poor quality. And poor quality will affect the workmanship. It will affect the outcome of the project itself. When we look at a budget is that amount of money that we assign to a specific project. There are some companies that will try to ballpark a budget number based on a similar size project that maybe they completed in the past. However, each project will be unique with its own set of issues that need to be considered. If it is possible that a current project is being installed with a different subcontractor or by a different installation technician that may be pretty good at the job, but he's not the best technician that installed the previous system of similar size. Materials could also be different, which can affect both labor and possibly material costs. Some contractors try to assign a cost by square foot, such as applied by some computer-based estimating tools for electrical contractors. While these programs may work well for electrical cost, they do not do well for security, access control, or video systems, which are not code-driven. These systems are based on the design and a user risk analysis that you perform for the job. Your first verification word is playground. To calculate a return on investment, a business is engaged in the industry to make a profit on the products and services that they deliver. By using a return on investment calculation, a company can evaluate the efficiency and the effectiveness of an investment made by that organization when they take on a project. If the return on investment calculation returns a negative number, then it is going to lose money and the project should not be undertaken. There are times when you may not want to take on a project because in the bid market, everybody is looking for the lowest number. And if the lowest number is one that will not allow the company to make money, then that project is not worth being engaged in. When we look at a project start, depending upon how an offer and acceptance is generated, a project manager may have been involved in the establishing the type of system or the services to be offered by either direct negotiation with the owner or as a consultant to an architect or an engineer that has been responsible for the scope of the work outlined in the contract documents. When dealing with the owner or the end user directly, it is important to establish as much information as possible about the project, what the client is expecting the system is going to accomplish for them. The project manager will ask questions and suggest possible solutions. This can also be an important training session because the client may not know the full extent of a system's capability. So this needs analysis is where we actually look at a work breakdown structure. We look at the tasks that need to be completed, and we need to prepare a schedule and prepare a quote. And once that is accepted, then obviously that is a project, and we can count on that as a project. So when we look at project management, what are the responsibilities? Well, the correct answer to this question is that depends. Project manager's role can be compared to that of a juggler. They have to keep all of the balls in the air while smiling on the outside and panicking on the inside. And of course, responsibilities change based on the phase of the project. When we look at the most common project management methodology used in low voltage construction industry, we look at the critical path method, or what we call CPM. We start by categorizing all of the activities needed to complete the project within a work breakdown structure, or what we call a WBS. Then we map the project's duration for each activity or dependency. This helps identifies all the activities that need to be completed simultaneously and what activities should be completed before others start. And the activity flow is kind of represented here. You notice that we have the initiation, the planning, the execution. Well, in the execution stage, you'll notice that we might be sent back to planning and then closing. So that is kind of the flow of the activities. Now let's look at each one of those and how it affects the project itself. So these phases of project management, the initiation, the planning, execution, control, and closing, it doesn't really matter which project management system that you choose. We just kind of mentioned the CPM, or the critical path method. The 5 phases are still applicable in managing the project. Some of the common methodologies are taught in project management courses include PRINCE2, projects in controlled environments, event chain methodology, agile project management, lean project management, extreme project management, and of course, the critical chain project management, which we refer to as the critical path method, or CMP. But we have all of those: the initiation, planning, execution, control, and closing. In fact, many companies practice this CMP, this critical path management, even though they've not been trained in any one of the project management styles. They do it because it's just, this is a natural flow of project management. In the initiation phase, one of those first steps is to review and evaluate all the project documents and to become familiar with the stakeholders, with the project expectations, and any timeline for project completion. We want to make sure that we review contracts, the equipment list, any information from pre-bid meetings or notes from a salesperson, it's important to have this solid understanding of the project, and usually on the first couple of pages of the contract drawings, you will find a list of stakeholders. Stakeholders are the project representatives, the things like the architect, the general contractor, any subcontractors, personal representatives of the owners. All of those will be our stakeholders, and we need to know those stakeholders, who they are. We also need to know how to get in touch with them. We need the correct information, the names, phone numbers, email addresses. Failure to get the correct information can lead to delays if you have questions, or if decisions need to be addressed during the execution phase of the process, then we need to be able to get in touch with these stakeholders. So this is required information. During the planning phase, we have several steps that we will have to follow, like developing a scope of work, selecting the vendors that we're going to use, formulate a budget. So all of these steps form some element of our plan on how we're going to manage this project. Anytime an element from the original plan changes, then a manager must modify the base plan, possibly the time frame or the budget. Some of the changes may require a request to a change order, and it has to be submitted up to one or more of the stakeholders to be able to get answers for that. But that is all in the planning stage of Now, in this planning stage, we're going to look at how these job functions will affect us, like the developing of the scope of work. When we look at developing a scope of work, we have to look at, is there more than one person or company working on this specific project? A scope of work will help coordinate the activities of the team. It is important that all members of the team have an understanding of the client's desired results and their responsibility in the project. So when we look at this scope of work, what work will the contractor do? How is that system going to be installed? What equipment is going to be provided? And we have to continually communicate. One of the things that we do is provide a work breakdown schedule. This helps identify all of the tasks that need to be completed for a specific project. By identifying each task, the appropriate order for that task can be identified and a time duration can be calculated. This step will be important in the development of a budget for the project. It also creates a list of tasks that has to be measured and tracked that is referred to as deliverables. So this is an example of a work breakdown structure. And you notice that we have several different areas, and the jobs in those specific areas are outlined. When we start making vendor selections, if you were the person the client hired to complete the task, they will be evaluating you based not only on your performance, but on any vendors or subcontractors that you employ to provide services or equipment to the project. So we have to be very careful when we make our vendor selections, or if we outsource certain parts of the task. We want to make sure that they have the level of expertise, they have the availability so that they can complete the project on the time. And as far as making vendor selections, it might be based on the fact that a particular vendor may provide more services than some other vendor, even though they may cost a little bit more money. If they can do it all in-house, then that might be a reason to select one vendor over another. We also need to lock down a budget. Some people think that a budget for project is the selling price of the system that's to be installed, and they're happy if they break even when a project is complete. A cost should be estimated and assigned to every line item in the work breakdown structure. That allows for tracking of costs during the project lifecycle. It can detect cost overrun and allow for adjustment before the project is complete. When we look at this budget, some of the labor cost might be based on past comparisons, things that you've done in the past. And one of the special things to consider is, do you have to integrate with somebody else's system? Do you have programming functions that you have to consider? The time that we have to do those, because those will all need to go into the budget so that we can have a working cost for this project that we are engaged in. So some of the things that will affect the budget that are often overlooked, especially by someone that is not really skilled as a project manager, may be the construction type of the facility itself, or the distance that you have to run wiring, the number of devices that need to be installed. So all of this is looked at in the original planning, and if a project allows for a pre-bid walkthrough, that is an important part of the process and can affect the budget. Just the distance that we have to drive to get to that project. And there are a lot of people that have to figure on putting technicians up in hotels and providing food per diem if they bid projects that are far away from their general location or their shop. One of the other complex part of project management is that we have to select our team. And the team that we select should be based on the skills that they bring to the project themselves. An employee that is your best programmer should not be used as a wire puller just because he's a good employee and is capable of completing work with little or no management oversight. The team has to work together to coordinate the activities, and the project manager is the person that directs this team's effort. We select our people based on those skills and trades that they do best. You don't want to pay a programmer to do menial labor. So we look for those assistants that can pull wire. That's a menial labor type job. And that person usually makes less than the programmer, which will affect your budget. Once we have selected a team, we need to schedule an initial project meeting. And the project meeting is where we discuss the project, and it is really where we try to get everybody on the team to buy into this project and the timeline and what the end user is expecting. This is where we need to answer any questions and ease any fears of the team members if they exist. It should be part pep rally, part informational, and part motivational, because we want to buy in for this. So once we have selected our team and had that initial team meeting, this meeting actually begins the official installation and management of the project itself. It should be an upbeat meeting that helps motivate the team. If a project is high profile, that should be stressed. We can say this was going to help promote the company and the community, and we can discuss that in the original meeting. We want to make sure that each member has an opportunity to get input into the group. If a member has expressed some negative input, try to establish whether or not the concern is going to have an effect on their involvement. And we want to make sure that we end this meeting on a positive note. Now, this can be an in-house meeting with all of our employees. There's probably going to be a progress meeting that is conducted by the general contractor, and you will see how he is looking at these same things, establishing this buy-in with all of the people on the project, where they lay out the dates of the project and how they expect this progress to go. When we create a project schedule, we're going to break this down into 5 different steps. Define the task, estimate the resources, set a sequence for the task to be completed, and the duration, the time frame, so that we can actually develop a schedule. So to prepare this project schedule, manager has to figure out what the tasks are, how long they take, and what are the resources. There's challenges. If you omit a task, then you might not be able to complete the project. And if you can't complete the project, or if you underestimate the length of time or the amount of resources, then you're going to miss your schedule. And that is going to affect the overall completion of the project itself. So to help estimate these tasks, we can use something that is called a PERT chart. A PERT chart will help define the tasks that need to be completed during the project and place the task in the order that the activities have to be completed in. It can show which activities can run in parallel with other activities. That would allow us the best use of our personnel. So when we start looking at personnel, it is not productive to have employees on a project if they do not have a specific task to perform. We try to use the best skilled employee for the project task that needs to be completed. If a task includes terminating fiber and the company does not have an employee that is skilled in that task, then we hire a subcontractor that is skilled. It could cost less to hire a skilled contractor than to rework a part of the job because an unskilled employee made mistakes in the termination process and the system does not work as it was designed to work. We can move installers around if necessary to get the right project, the right person on the job. When we start looking at the best people, that can change project by project, depending upon what type of system you're installing. One of the ways to keep up with the project and a timeline can be by using a Gantt chart. Now, this is an example of a Gantt chart that you have. We have colored markers that are used to indicate the process of the activities, and we have to keep up with this. If you have good communication with field workers, then you can kind of determine as you go along what percentage of the job has been completed. There's several public sources for PERT or Gantt chart software, as well as project management programs that contain a list and email functionality so that you can keep everybody apprised of the project and how that project is going. Your second verification word is sketch. 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 When we look at project documentation, you want to make sure that the documents that you put together are done in a timely manner. Now, project documentation can fall into two general categories. Submittal documentation that is provided for approval before the actual work begins. This documentation may be for the owner to approve or submitted to a code official for permit application. If you're looking on a fire alarm system, there is a list of documentation specified in the building code or NFPA 72, and we can follow that list of documentation. It would also work with any other non-code required systems. The second category is the as-built documentation that is provided to the owner at the completion of the project. Someone on the team should be assigned the task of preparing this documentation through the life of the project so it can be completed and available at the appropriate time. This can include all the cut sheets. It can include the as-built drawings, the software for the system, a description of all the hardware and the components. When we look at managing this documentation, more architects and engineers are adding requirements in the bid documents that require written end-user documentation for the specific system being installed. They are not accepting the manufacturer's generic system descriptions that include features described that are not part of the complete system, such as information concerning elevator recall or an area of rescue phone in a stairwell when the building is a single-story building. So the key to creating successful documentation is keep the language simple. So if you have to write a specific document for like an end user, then don't assume that people know industry terms or concepts. And as you document those steps on how to use the system, don't forget key steps that the customer is going to need to know. And you make sure that you test your document, read it to make sure that it makes sense. During the execution phase, this is where a project manager has to actually make decisions. They manage. The four listed tasks: manage expectations, manage the team, maintain the schedule, program the system, are important and occupy the greatest amount of the project manager's time. Improper management of these tasks can have a very negative effect on the overall project and especially the budget. We will talk about each one of these tasks in greater detail. When we look at managing expectations, we talk about the client or customer. We're referring to the person that you're working for. That person might be the actual owner of the property. However, it may be the electrical contractor that subcontracted a portion of the project to your company. Communications during the phase of the project that your company is engaged in is important. You may be doing a very good job installing the system, but if the contractor perceives that you are behind, then that contractor will not feel that your company is organized or skilled enough for consideration on future projects. Remember that the customer satisfaction is determined on how well you perform. Team communication is very important, especially in projects that can last for months or even years. A team has to be motivated and reminded of the goal. A good project manager should have the ability to keep the sense of team spirit alive. Being available and passing information both up and down the chain is one way to keep the team working together. We can always ask for updates from the field and hopefully handle complaints very quickly. We've got to be available to team members so that they can pass that information and they can perform their task. Some of our projects have the role of a facilitator. This is an independent meeting manager that can be brought in, especially if there is difficulty between team members, where there's a decision that cannot be agreed to by the team members, and this lack of action can stall the project on a project, the progress on a project. A facilitator can be employed to work out conflict between the parties. The facilitator can either be a short-term or long-term participant in the management process. Understand that the facilitator is not a decision maker. They manage a meeting in such a way that the stakeholders reach the conclusion. They reach a buy-in, a level that they can buy in. I have been in many meetings with a facilitator that would help by asking questions of each one of the individual parties involved in that project to try to come to consensus so that project can move forward. Using a Gantt chart can help keep a schedule on track. If a change in some other contractor's schedule creates an interruption in your schedule, make sure that it is reported to the general contractor or other appropriate party, and suggest additional time can be added to adjust your schedule, such as a time and space conflict. So it is important that when we start looking at our schedule, that we know how other trades will affect ours. I've been in the situation where a general contractor on a school, we were working on putting in duct detectors in the air conditioning system in the gymnasium, and the general contractor came in the meeting and said, look, we're going to be finishing the floor in the gymnasium this next week, and I need you to be out of there. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. We're not complete. We're mounting duct detectors. The air handling units are 22 feet above the floor. We have lifts in there where we can do our work, and we've got to have those lifts. And so the schedule had to be changed for finishing the floor so that we could be finished. One of the suggestions was the contractor said, well, bring in more people. And of course, in this particular project, we can't really bring in more people because there's no work for those people to do. We still have to keep the project on schedule, and we have to work within that schedule. So we try to maintain the schedule as best we can. When we look at system programming, you do have to consider the time. Many of the systems today are computer-based, and they're capable of many functions that a client may or may not use. Having a test lab will allow installers or programmers the opportunity to test these features on the bench before they get out into the field, where they might have to figure out how to make the functions work for the first time. So programming can be very time-consuming activity, especially when there is one of the features is new to an installer or a programmer. So before programming, we need to create a checklist of all the functions that the client wants that system to be able to handle for them, and then provide that list to the installer so that they can be familiar with what they're going to be programming. In the control phase, control is the most important fact of the execution phase of the project. The control can trigger a new round of planning and implementation during the project. A change in the scope of the work. Possibly they're going to add additional classrooms based on the fact that they've got some additional money. That can send us back to planning all over again. It does have a side effect, and it can have a negative influence on the budget. So as control is an ongoing function, it has to be exercised until the project is complete and turned over to the owner. Some of the things that we have to consider are managing change, tracking deliverables in the control phase, tracking cost. When we look at managing change, communication with each of the team members help to ensure that change orders are submitted and approved before any additional work is completed that would occur if the requested change were authorized. Some GCs will not approve change order requests that would provide additional time or money if the contractor has already completed the work before submitting the change order request. I've actually had that happen. They requested a change. We just happened to be working in that area. The technicians on the job went ahead and made those changes, like the location of devices. And then when we submitted the change order, the contractor said, well, I walked through there. That's already been done. So when a change request will reflect work that has already been completed, it is appropriate to request additional time be added to your completion date to adjust the time for reworking an installed portion of the project itself. So you may not be able to get money, but you can always use more time. A lot of projects have a penalty clause if you don't finish on time. We want to make sure that we track deliverables. Deliverables are not limited to equipment that you've ordered from a supply house or a manufacturer. They can be part of the process, such as something that has to be constructed or even documented, and it has to be produced. So you have to ask yourself the following questions. What are your internal deliverables? How do you track their development? How long does it typically take you to develop each deliverable? Like the internal deliverables could be your system documentation. What do you do if the timeline for deliverables starts slipping? So those are important things to manage. Some of the deliverables can be support for subsystems that you haven't worked with before, and the test of these subsystems, like a stairwell pressurization system for a commercial building that has a fire alarm in it, and the programming of that. Those could be deliverables. Your third verification word is washboard. WASHBOARD. In managing change, we need to track cost. This is an ongoing process that should occur all along the project. Project managers should not wait until the end of the project audit to find out that they have exceeded the budget. So when we look at tracking costs, cost of goods, we track that using a material list. Cost of time and labor, look at timesheets. Cost of your company's bottom line in the first two categories might send you over the budget. So we want to make sure that we follow those throughout the entire process and not wait until the end to find out that we've overrun the budget. In the closing phase, This is where all the tasks are finished and you have an operational system that is ready to be delivered to the client. Closing documentation should be provided during the commissioning phase. Make sure that you have any service agreements or monitoring agreements filled out ready for the client's acceptance, even if it's not been contracted before the closing. We want to be able to turn over all of that information, all of the paperwork, and make sure that we have a service contract, or at least make sure we offer a service contract. One of the areas that we have problems with is that salespeople don't normally ask for a service contract. We wait until the closing phase before we actually ask, and some don't ask at all. So this is where we turn over documentations, drawings, software, and explain to the end user what needs to be taken care of during the life of the system, the service contract. Depending on the client, in the closing phase, a company may need to perform the following tasks with the client: a job cost report. In a job cost report, especially in government work, if you're working on a government job, this is something that they can ask for. They actually want a summary of your cost, because in some contracts, they guarantee the general contractor will make a profit. And so they do verify all job costs to make sure that that contractor made a profit. The other thing that you may be asked to participate in is a project review. And in a project review, this is the closing phase where they review your work, and some of it is looking for mistakes and some of the things that have affected the project. So we will look at those individually. For a job cost report, you may have to turn over completed paperwork that details the cost related to the project. In some projects, such as federal government contracts, this information is required to be submitted so it can be audited to ensure a fair price is paid for a system or service. They're not out to limit the provider's ability to make a profit. They just want to ensure that the government got a fair cost. In dealing with an owner or an end user, the final invoice for service will meet that standard of a job cost report. In public bid projects, it is common for the general contractor to hold back 10 or 15% of the project costs to ensure a completed project. So after we turn in our job cost report and they review it, then the client will determine to pay any remaining balances. But that may be a requirement in the contract. And if it is a requirement, that is normally in the specification that the architect or the engineer put out, the bid documents for that. An owner may want a report on the total cost of the system that was just installed. In some cases, this total cost of acquisition will be asked for prior to a contract being accepted by the end user. They may not sign a contract. And so when you start looking at total cost, this is the price plus any cost needed to purchase an item and get it to the point that it can be used. These other costs include research, accounting, commissions, legal fees, transportation, and installation costs. Typically, total cost of acquisition does not include training and system integration or other costs that might be considered operational costs to maintain that system This is just total cost of acquisition. There is a different phrase. It is total cost of ownership. There are more owners requesting a more detailed cost estimate to better compare the long-range cost between two different manufacturers' products. This usually occurs in public bid offerings, and a specific time of estimation will be specified, such as they want the total cost of ownership for 3 years. Now, this could include training, integration of software, installation of patches or upgrades to software, testing and troubleshooting, and maintenance. Because many low voltage systems have an undetermined life expectancy, normally a bid specification may state they want a total cost of ownership for 3 or 5 years on that. If some type of off-premise notification or system monitoring is required, this is a fee that should be included in the total cost of ownership if one is required. When we look at the project review, these are important to identify positive aspects of the management style and the efficiency of the team, as well as to identify areas for improvement. Even if a company does not have a system to evaluate the performance on the project manager should do a self-evaluation and build on the strength. So we go through the cost of the project, look for things that negatively impacted the project. Is there a cost increase on the equipment from the date that we bid the project to the date that we bought the actual equipment or actually took acceptance of that equipment? Were there any problems? We want to determine if there's problems that we had with installation so that we don't have those same problems again. Well, to help us do this, we can have an auditor come in. Normally, an auditor is employed by the company to evaluate the process and identify risk and inefficiencies. An auditor can be a company employee or an outside facilitator. An audit can be performed midterm, which can identify activities that have gone well and what needs to be improved to successfully complete the project. If the audit is conducted at the conclusion of the project, its finding can be used to develop criteria for future projects. So we look at basically lessons learned. We audit, we identify these risks. Did we handle it correctly? The important aspect of an audit is to make sure that the company understands where they've done very well and where they did not do so well. It could also consider the satisfaction of the stakeholders. Was this project beneficial to the company? What we learn in project management is, did you make a profit?
Now that you have completed this presentation and you have your list of verification words, you can request an attendance form. Send your request to lowvoltage.ceu@gmail.com. Include the name that you want printed on the CEU form and the name of the presentation that you have viewed, along with the date that you've completed this course. Include a list of the verification words as they were announced. An attendance form will be returned to that email address within 10 days. You may also include comments about the course that you want to share with the association's education committee, or you can request additional topics for future classes. We hope that you've enjoyed this presentation. We look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thank you.